Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and iOS 17.3.1 has been out for a few weeks, and iOS 17.4 RC has been out for a few days. iOS 17.4 RC, or release candidate, is the final version, and we have even more to talk about as far as new features since the iOS 17.4 RC is out. What's new video. Now, this particular update does have a lot of features in it. It's the next version that's coming out. We'll talk about when to expect that a little bit later. We'll also talk about the overall experience. Not just my experience, but your experience based off the YouTube community poll, where at the time of this video, there's over 21,000 votes and 223 comments. I've read all of those comments to determine what the next update will be like for the majority of people based off that information. Now, the first thing is a few pieces of Apple news. Apple's at-home repair program is now available for M3 Macs. If we go to Apple's self-service repair website, you can start your order parts for it, whether that be a fan or something else. They sort of limit what you can do, but you can look at Mac laptops, go to your product model, and you'll see that in specific areas or regions, depending where you live, you'll be able to get M3 parts. At least Apple announced that. So that should be available very soon, if not already, depending on where you live. Also this week, it looks like, according to Mark Gurman, the Apple Car project is no more. Apple has sort of done away with this. They've spent a lot of money in R&D and development. I'm sure we'll benefit from some of that with AI, what they've learned about it, and much more. Also, another thing is your Apple ID may soon be renamed. Apple ID that we've had for a while with iCloud and more could be renamed to Apple Account. Not a big news story, but just something worth mentioning. Also, if you use Apple's savings account in Apple Wallet, if you have their savings account, they've now upped the amount you can actually keep in there from $250,000 to $1 million if you actually have that kind of money. So if you do, you can now deposit up to $1 million. Also, one other thing I wanted to mention is we know with the inclusion of iOS 17.4 in the European Union, we'll have sideloading, and SetApp is going to be one of the first third-party app stores in the EU. If you haven't seen SetApp before, they basically have a subscription service to a bunch of apps, so they'll be bringing this to your different devices in the EU where you'll have that third-party app store ability. So that should be one of the first. They've apparently announced this, where they're going to try and be one of the first once this update is available. Now, as far as new features in iOS 17.4, of course, we know all of the ones coming with sideloading, default browsers, different changes there for the European Union. We've got transcripts for podcasts and much more, with things sort of unifying the home button across podcasts, books, and music, and lots of other little changes here and there. However, there is a new change as far as PWA, or personalized web apps. Apple was not going to allow this in the EU, and now they've changed their mind and have decided to allow this. So that feature will not be removed from the European Union, and that's probably to avoid different lawsuits and things. Apple does not want to deal with that, and they since removed it, and it looks like they're going to bring it back. So that's good news if you're in the European Union using those web apps. Apple also confirmed that FaceTime reactions can actually be disabled by third-party apps. This has been long speculated to be in iOS 17.4. Apple has since confirmed it. Also, there's a new setting for iMessage. I mentioned this a little bit, where iMessage actually has a new business feature that we know about coming with iOS 17.4. And if we go into our settings, go down to Messages, if we scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a new section for Messages for Business. If we go here, you'll see that we can get business updates. It's enabled by default, and it says get updates on your orders and other transactions if you've chosen to receive them on a business's website. So that's something that's included with 17.4, and there's just an option to turn this off. Also, one thing you may not have seen for some time is if we go into the App Store and then tap our account name at the top, you'll see we have apps, subscriptions, purchase history, and notifications. If we go into purchase history, give it a second to load, it verifies it's you typically if you haven't logged in, and now you can actually sort it based on what you want to see, your date range, the last 90 days, last year, cost, and more. So that's now sortable where it wasn't before. Now, within Siri, there's a new feature, and I've talked a little bit about this, but there's some updates with this. If we go into messaging with Siri, you'll see that we have multiple languages here. Many people thought this was just for German, as I showed this as a previous example. However, it can actually read back multiple languages in whatever's set here. So if someone messages you and it reads it back, it can read it back in this language plus any of the others you have here. So if we go to add a language, you'll see that we have Arabic, Chinese, Danish, Dutch, Finnish, French, Hebrew, Italian, Japanese, Norwegian, Russian, Spanish, Swedish, Thai, Turkish, and more. So all of these languages can read back if you select all of them. Maybe we want French Canadian, it will add it here. And if someone actually messages me in these languages, it will read back in those languages. So that's just a update where Siri will read that back. It doesn't necessarily understand you better in these languages. It just will read that information to you. So that's a new feature, and hopefully that clarifies it for many people. Now, as far as new releases this week, we did get a few different releases, of course, that went along with iOS 17.4. We also got an update to AirPods Pro 2 beta. So this is something that we actually recently got the other day, and there's a new beta update. So if you have that enabled, let me show you the version here. If you have it enabled, I'll let it reconnect here. It finally connected. Let's go ahead and go into this. And if we scroll down, you'll see at the very bottom, we have a new beta update, 6E188. Now, what's in this specifically? We don't know. Maybe it's to fix some connectivity issues we've had all along. It's a little bit buggy when you have all of these devices around. Sometimes it sort of jumps between them. That's pretty normal. But many people have been having issues with just connectivity in general on iPhone 15 devices with the Bluetooth. So it could be resolving some of those issues, but specifically what it does, we don't really know. If you've been wanting to try one of these betas, though, you will need to have Xcode connected to your device. Also, you'll need to enable developer options, and then if you scroll down, you'll see developer. Scroll to the very bottom under developer. Then you can go into pre-release beta firmware and select the AirPods you want to update. Then they update on their own, just like normal AirPods updates. You don't really have a control over that, but they'll update on their own, just like they do if you have a normal public release as well. Now, some odd things we didn't have this week is we had no watch update. I'm not sure why we didn't have that, but we had no WatchOS 10.4 Beta 5 or RC yet. So at this point, we haven't seen that. And also, with Apple getting rid of the web apps not working in the EU, we do have a new build number we're expecting on Monday or Tuesday, whenever that release is coming out. We'll talk about in a moment, but we do expect a new build number there. I thought today or yesterday, depending on when you're watching this, that RC2 would come out for iOS 17.4, but we never got an iOS 17.4 RC2, but I would expect a new build number when this releases to the public. And as far as when to expect it, well, typically we see these on Monday. I would expect it as soon as Monday the 4th, possibly a little bit later in the week if they have issues, but typically it's a Monday release on the 4th or 5th. And then we'll have the next version. So iOS 17.5 Beta 1 could be in the next version, where we'll see a bunch of features that they probably removed from iOS 17.4 to push to iOS 17.5. For example, one of those features, and I was going to mention it, but it looks like they removed it with the RC, is when you're playing a different podcast with the widget, it would change to the background color of the podcast itself. The RC version removes this. They also remove all mention of HomeOS. They've changed the navigation bar in Siri, where they've made it smaller, again, where it was a little bit wider before. The stopwatch live activity was removed with Beta 2. They haven't brought it back, so if you go into your clock, start a stopwatch, swipe home, it used to be a live activity. That's gone now, so hopefully they bring that back. And also they pulled the ability to use SharePlay with your HomePod and Apple TV. Those were all expected with iOS 17.4, and I would expect them to push that to iOS 17.5. Of course, all of the big updates will be with iOS 18, and we can expect that in June. Typically the first or second week of June is where we'll actually have WWDC and see the next version. We're expecting some major redesign elements, as well as some huge AI updates for things such as Siri, generative AI throughout, and much more. What we know specifically at this point is that it's going to be a big update. We don't know any specifics about the update itself just yet, but I would expect those to be leaked over the next couple of months, at least some of the features. Also, we did hear about what devices would support iOS 18 this past week. I made a separate video, but basically all of the iOS 17 supported devices, including the iPhone XR and XS Max, are expected to gain support for iOS 18 at this point. It's from a very reliable source that's leaked information about iOS before, very, very reliably. Many websites and other reputable places have actually seen this account before post very reliable information, so I would expect that to probably be the case. However, Apple could change their mind. Now, as far as iOS 17.3.1, well, that will be old news in just a few more days, but there are some remaining bugs. I'll just go over them quickly if you weren't aware of them already or you're experiencing them. Battery is worse for about 50% of people. 50% say it's better. Many people are experiencing battery drain overnight, though, if you're actually leaving it off a charger. So if you don't charge every night like I do, they leave it off, sometimes it will just drain. Also, Apple fixed the text overlay issue, but selecting text with the cursor arrow is more difficult, it seems. So if you're in a note, maybe selecting something, maybe you're trying to select text, it can be more difficult. Also, some people still have the brightness bug where it will sort of just jump around. That seems to be fixed in the next version, and a few people are still having issues charging where it won't charge until you reboot the device. However, iOS 17.4 seems to fix a lot of those issues. Specifically, the notification bug is fixed, and this will hopefully be the last time I talk about it until after this is out and available to the public. And you'll see this where it just doesn't jump around anymore. Additionally, stickers and messaging is fixed. So if we go into messages, within messages, if we go into stickers, you'll see they pop up as you would expect. And then of course you can just grab one, drag it wherever you'd like. And additionally, it seems that the stock wallpaper bug is fixed. So that was an issue in one of the betas, not really known elsewhere. And then also AirPods seem to work better for most people. Again, there is a beta for it, but the overall connectivity seems to be better for most. Now, there's no keyboard lag for me, but many report that the keyboard is quite laggy. Whether you're going into Spotlight Search or maybe you're just going into a note and typing, it seems like it can be laggy. So within Notes, if I type, I haven't had this issue, you'll see it's nice and fast for me. It auto-corrected like you would expect. I haven't seen much lag at all. I am on the latest device, so maybe that's the difference, but it seems to be pretty good for me overall. Now, other than that, it seems to have pretty good connectivity overall. There are some people still having issues with Wi-Fi, and I've suggested if you reset your network settings, it seems to fix it for a lot of people, but not everyone. I have noticed where if you have a mesh system at home, whether it's Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7, I typically use an Eero mesh system, but if you use Google or others, sometimes it won't jump between different devices. That can be on the router side as well, but if you are having issues and you have all of your passwords saved, you can go into General, go down to Transfer or Reset iPhone, Reset, and then Reset Network Settings. Just make sure you have your Wi-Fi passwords, as you'll probably have to re-enter all of them. But this typically fixes most of those issues if you're having them. Additionally, weather is sometimes not showing the correct averages for some people. When they go into it, it just doesn't work properly. I haven't found a single instance in weather where it doesn't work properly for me, other than maybe being a little bit laggy from time to time. CarPlay disconnects for some people on iPhone 15 devices. However, this seems to be more and more widespread. And then also, there's squared off notifications sometimes. You pull down notifications and they'll be squared off and then they'll jump to round it. It's a small graphical glitch there. Other people are having similar delays when you pull down and go into Spotlight Search. The keyboard's not showing up. And then also the wallpaper dimming bug is there. So if I swipe home, it sort of desaturates the background. So all of those things are a problem. And as far as if they've improved the camera at all, well, there is an issue there, at least for some people. Some people have said that framing is off. So maybe you're framing a photo and then you use digital zoom. So you go past the regular zoom and you digitally zoom in. So if I have the camera centered and I press the picture here, let's see if it's actually centered. It looks okay to me. And here's a few other photos to see what it looks like. So in general, I think the photos look pretty good, but a few people have said that when you're using digital zoom, the photo is not what you see after you take it. Also, Apple seemed to improve zoom in previous versions, so they could continue to improve the camera. But let me know what you think about the camera in iPhone 15. They don't typically improve them in older devices, though. Now, as far as the release notes, there were quite a few in the Feedback app, so we'll go into the recent activity, and they even updated them for the RC, which is great. There's still some known issues here with default browser choice issues and some others, but they could resolve these when it comes out to the public. And of course, we'll have security updates as well. But I'll link this in the description if you want to check out all the notes, as there's quite a few good things here, and I'm glad to see Apple updating this with just simple things such as resolving issues with WebKit, or maybe just resolving different code issues. Siri having new features, just giving us more and more information is always great. As far as overall performance, it's been pretty smooth and consistent overall throughout all of these betas. If we go into music and maybe just scroll here, it's nice and smooth. Go home, you'll see things are nice and quick. If we go over to podcasts, switch between different menu options, everything's nice and fast, feels very quick, and ProMotion ramps up and down nicely. Everything's very smooth. The same is true on older devices. Throughout all the betas, it's actually been pretty good. And I've talked about that with benchmark scores we'll take a look at in a moment, but just using it in general, loading different apps, things in general as far as the experience seem to be pretty good. And you can see what's new as we've got a new splash screen here. So depending on which device you're using, you should have a pretty good experience overall. The latest devices, of course, should be the fastest. As far as overall heat, well, initially after installing this, it has to install the full update, so it's going to be a little bit warm, but after that, it's been nice and cool for the most part. I have heard a couple complaints of it getting a little warm, but again, let's take a look with the thermal camera. This is 17.3.1 that's barely been used, and I've been holding 17.4. With 17.4 RC at the hottest point, we're at about 89.5 to 90 degrees. On 17.3.1, it's staying nice and cool, right around 80 degrees. On 17.4 RC, 33 to 33.5 degrees Celsius. On 17.3.1, we have about 27 to 28 degrees Celsius. So overall, fairly cool using it just generally. Of course, it's going to be a little bit warmer on the one I'm holding in my hand the entire time, and it does seem to run a little bit hotter than the previous version. But overall, it's not hot, it's just a little bit warmer than the other one that I haven't been using. Now, as far as overall benchmarks, let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we'll go into our Geekbench scores, then we'll take a look at the battery. But you'll see here, we'll give it a second to go back and maybe run the history. You'll see from today, I had 2,915 for single core, 7,258 for multi-core. Compared to what we had before, I ran it earlier, it's definitely an improvement. It's a little bit higher than even Beta 4 was. So overall, I think it's doing quite well, and it's performing as you would expect. I've seen these go up and down a little bit. They'll vary from time to time, but in general, they're quite good. As far as battery life, well, let's go ahead and take a look at that. And one of the nice things is it's nice and convenient to see our cycle count and everything now directly from this battery health menu. So if we go into battery health, you'll see I have 119 cycles with 100% capacity. Here's coconut battery if you want to see some other stats as well. And let's go back and take a look at the battery life. Now, depending on how you use it, it's going to vary, but you'll see yesterday I had 2 hours and 4 minutes of screen active time, 3 hours and 45 minutes of screen idle time, and used about 40% of the battery. Today, the same thing. I've used exactly 40% at this point, 2 hours and 56 minutes of screen active time, 4 hours and 19 minutes of screen idle time. It does get me through a day. I am seeing good results from many people, and we'll take a look at those comments in a moment. But overall, it gets me through a day. It's not phenomenal, but I wish they would improve this a little bit so it doesn't include things such as maybe using this when it's on a stand next to your bed. It will include the screen on time if you're using standby mode. Now, as far as if you should install iOS 17.4 RC, well, at this point, I probably would if I want to try it. It seems to be pretty stable. Just make sure you have a backup. And also, when it releases to the public, we probably will have another build number. So we'll have another update from that, but that should be just to fix a few different issues, maybe additional issues as well. And then, of course, we'll have security updates. So definitely, if you want to try it out, you can. And it seems to be better than previous updates so far. Now, as far as what you had to say, let's take a look at some of your comments. Arter1789 said iPhone 15 Pro Max, 17.4 RC, battery life is poor. Lokman Syed said iOS 17.4 RC has been the most stable iOS that I've ever had on my iPhone 15 Pro Max. Anthony Hinson 8394 says I'm running iOS 17.4 and my phone is starting to overheat. Messages double when I send them and the phone will lag so bad that it restarts on its own. iPhone XR, by the way. D. Helby said, 14 Pro here. After installing 17.4 RC, I have battery drain and my device is heating up while it's being used. WhatsApp and Telegram, 15 minutes of shooting video in 1080p 60 took over 20%. Haven't had these issues on 17.3.1. Rob's Metal Covers 1452 said, I'm on 17.4 on my iPhone 14 Pro Max. I think I'm finally not having battery drain issues. Battery lasts a good bit longer, plus the performance is better too. Isaac Man 1870 says, I'm on iOS 17.4 RC on my iPhone 13 Pro Max. No bugs and great battery life, but I wish the battery health stuff would vintage to older iPhones. I agree, it definitely should be on older phones. So that's it for iOS 17.4 RC, and iOS 17.3.1 will be the last version in just a few days. If you found any additional features I haven't mentioned in this video that are new in the RC version or I haven't mentioned before, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.